Welcome, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, brothers and sisters. Today, a new day of Life Orancia book reading. We are still in paper 53, which is all about the Lucifer Rebellion. And today we dive through the topics mentioned on the screen: Outbreak of the Rebellion and the nature of the conflict. And as last, we have a loyal Seraphic commander. So let us dive into this and see what we can learn today more about the Lucifer Rebellion. All right, you can read along with me, and I advise you to set aside all the things that you have learned so far and just take this information with an open mind. And after hearing and reading along with me, meditate upon it with the help of the Holy Spirit and the Spirit of Truth, and ask these spirits to help you to get an in-depth understanding and clarification about this information. Section 4, Outbreak of the Rebellion. The Lucifer Manifesto was issued at the annual conclave of Satania on the Sea of Glass. And the Sea of Glass is also mentioned in the book of Revelation. So now we get also a more in-depth understanding about the Sea of Glass that was being seen by the Apostle John in his vision, and that was shown to him. So this Sea of Glass in actuality was referring to Satania. So again, the Lucifer Manifesto was issued at the annual conclave of Satania on the Sea of Glass, in the presence of the assembled hosts of Jerusalem. On the last day of the year, about 200,000 years ago, Urantia time, Satan proclaimed that worship could be accorded the universal forces, physical, intellectual, and spiritual, but that allegiance could be acknowledged only to the actual and present ruler, Lucifer, the so-called friend of men and angels, and the so-called God of liberty. So maybe we get now also an understanding about this whole liberty statue. Self-assertion was the battle cry of the Lucifer Rebellion. One of his chief arguments was that if self-government was good and right for the Melchizedeks and other groups, it was equally good for all orders of intelligence. He was bold and persistent in the advocacy of the, between quotation marks, equality of mind, and the, between quotation marks, brotherhood of intelligence. He maintained that all government should be limited to the local planets and their voluntary confederation into the local systems. All other supervision he disallowed. He promised the planetary princes that they should rule the worlds as supreme executives. He denounced the location of legislative activities on the constellation headquarters and the conduct of judicial affairs on the universe capital. Lucifer, contended that all these functions of government should be concentrated on the system capitals and proceeded to set up his own legislative assembly and organized his own tribunals under the jurisdiction of Satan. And Lucifer, directed that the princes on the apostate worlds do the same. So now we know where this word apostate comes from. Apostolic is coming in actuality through Jesus, and apostate is in actuality coming through Satan, or Lucifer, better said. The entire administrative cabinet of Lucifer went over in a body and were sworn in publicly as the officers of the administration of the new head of the so-called liberated worlds and systems. While there had been 2 previous rebellions in Nebadon, they were in distant constellations. Lucifer held that these insurrections were unsuccessful because the majority of the intelligence failed to follow their leaders. Well, in actuality, you can say those people, those humans and other beings that were living in these worlds, were so clever not to follow these rebellious leaders. So you need to turn this, and if humanity on this planet would do the same, then all that we are in now will cease to exist. Because we are also dealing with a high level of corruption and rebellion. This rebellion is still going on and is being done by all these world leaders that this world, the last 100 years, has seen, at least the last 100 years. So these intelligences Lucifer speaks about were in actuality clever to not follow their corrupted leaders. Lucifer contended that majorities rule, that between quotation marks, mind is inviolable. The freedom allowed him, Lucifer, by the universe rulers apparently sustained many of his nefarious contentions. He was given a free hand to prosecute his seductive plan without let or hindrance. All the merciful delays of justice Lucifer pointed to as evidence of the inability of the government of the Paradise Sons to stop the rebellion. He would openly defy and arrogantly challenge Michael, Emmanuel, which is the older brother of Michael, and thus not Jesus, and the Ancients of Days, and then point to the fact that no action ensued as positive evidence of the impotency of the universe and the super-universe governments. Gabriel was personally present throughout all these disloyal proceedings and only announced that he would, in due time, speak for Michael, and that all beings would be left free and unmolested in their choice, that the government of the sons for the Father desired only that loyalty and devotion which was voluntary, wholehearted, and sophistry proof. Lucifer was permitted fully to establish and thoroughly to organize his rebel government before Gabriel made any effort to contest the right of succession, the right of secession, or to counterwork the rebel propaganda. This is done so that the rest of the universe could get the opportunity to learn from all this. But the constellation fathers immediately confined the action of these disloyal personalities to the system of Satania. Nevertheless, this period of delay was a time of great trial and testing to the loyal beings of all Satania. All was chaotic for a few years, and there was great confusion on the mentioned worlds. Then we go to point 5, section 5. Section 5, nature of the conflict. Upon the outbreak of the Satania rebellion, Michael took counsel of his paradise brother Emmanuel. Following this momentous conference, Michael announced that he would pursue the same policy which had characterized his dealings with similar upheavals in the past, an attitude of non-interference. At the time of this rebellion and the two which preceded it, there was no absolute and personal sovereign authority in the universe of Nebadon. Michael ruled by divine right as vicegerent of the Universal Father, but not yet in his own personal right. He had not completed his bestowal career. He had not yet been vested with all power in heaven and on earth. This came later when he closed his seventh bestowal here on earth as Jesus of Nazareth when he was hanging at the cross. And so this whole idea of the real story behind Jesus hanging on the cross, and especially the sentence when he says, "And now it is finished," has all to do with the fact that from that moment on, he got full sovereignty over his own created universe. From the outbreak of rebellion to the day of his enthronement as sovereign ruler of Nebadon, Michael never interfered with the rebel forces of Lucifer. They were allowed to run a free course for almost 200,000 years of Urantia time. So now you can imagine 200,000 years of rebellion, that this still unto the day of today has its ripple effect and consequences that we see being played out here in the governmental body as we know it in the world today. Christ Michael now has ample power and authority to deal promptly, even summarily, with such outbreaks of disloyalty. But we doubt that this sovereign authority would lead him to act differently if another such upheaval should occur. Since Michael elected to remain aloof from the actual warfare of the Lucifer rebellion, Gabriel called his personal staff together on Edentia and in council with the Most Highs, elected to assume command of the loyal hosts of Satania. Michael remained on Salvington while Gabriel proceeded to Jerusalem and establishing himself on the sphere dedicated to the Father, the same universal Father whose personality Lucifer and Satan had questioned. In the presence of the foregathered hosts of loyal personalities, he displayed the banner of Michael, the material emblem of the Trinity government of all creation. This emblem is in actuality three blue concentric circles. The three azure blue concentric circles on a white background, which you can see if you go to the tab where it says paper 53, you can see this banner, this emblem, the three azure blue concentric circles. In the center of which the Lucifer emblem, better said, the Lucifer emblem was a banner of white with one red circle in the center of which a black solid circle appeared. There was war in heaven. Michael's commander and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon symbolizes all these corrupted figures, such as Lucifer, Satan, and Caligustia, and the apostate princes, which are the former planetary prince of this planet. Caligustia and the dragon and his rebellious angels fought but prevailed not. This war, this so-called war in heaven, was not a physical battle as such. A conflict might be conceived on Urantia. In the early days of the struggle, Lucifer held forth continuously in the planetary amphitheater. Gabriel conducted an unceasing exposure of the rebel sophistries from his headquarters taken up near at hand. The various personalities present on the sphere who were in doubt as to their attitude would journey back and forth between these discussions until they arrived at a final decision. But this so-called war in heaven was very terrible and very real. While displaying none of the barbarites so characteristic of physical warfare on the immature worlds, this conflict was far more deadly. Material life is in jeopardy in material combat, but the war in heaven was fought in terms of life eternal. And then we have section 6, a loyal seraphic commander. There were many noble and inspiring acts of devotion and loyalty which were performed by numerous personalities during the interim between the outbreak of hostilities and the arrival of the new system ruler and his staff. But the most thrilling of all these daring feats of devotion was the courageous conduct of Manochia, the second in command of the Satania headquarters, Seraphim. At the outbreak of rebellion on Jerusalem, the head of the Seraphic hosts joined the Lucifer cause. This no doubt explains why such a large number of the fourth order, the system administrator Seraphim went astray. The Seraphic leader was spiritually blinded by the brilliant personality of Lucifer. His charming ways fascinated the lower orders of celestial beings. They simply could not comprehend that it was possible for such a dazzling personality to go wrong. Not long since, in describing the experiences associated with the onset of the Lucifer rebellion, Manocchia said, "But my most exhilarating moment was the thrilling adventure connected with the Lucifer rebellion when, as second Seraphic commander, I refused to participate in the projected insult to Michael, and the powerful rebels sought my destruction by means of the liaison forces they had arranged. There was a tremendous upheaval on Jerusalem, but not a single loyal seraphim was harmed. Upon the default of my immediate superior, it devolved upon me to assume command of the angelic hosts of Jerusalem as a titular director of the confused seraphic affairs of the system. I was morally upheld by the Melchizedeks, ably assisted by a majority of the material sons, deserted by a tremendous group of my own order, but magnificently supported by the ascendant mortals on Jerusalem. Having been automatically thrown out of the constellation circuits by the secession of Lucifer, we were dependent on the loyalty of our intelligence corps, who forwarded calls for help to Edensia from the nearby system of Rantulia, and we found that the kingdom of order, the intellect of loyalty, and the spirit of truth were inherently triumphant over rebellion, self-assertion, and so-called personal liberty. We were able to carry on until the arrival of the new system sovereign, the worthy successor of Lucifer, and immediately thereafter I was assigned to the corps of the Melchizedek receivership of Urantia, assuming jurisdiction over the loyal seraphic orders on the world of the traitorous Caligastia, who had proclaimed his sphere a member of the newly projected system of so-called liberated worlds and emancipated personalities, proposed in the famous Declaration of Liberty issued by Lucifer in his call to the liberty-loving, free-thinking, and forward-looking intelligences of the misruled and maladministered worlds of Satania. This angel is still in service on Urantia, functioning as associate chief of Seraphim. And with this said, I have already come to the end of this reading today. Maybe I will do a double reading, which means a second reading, but I will see how it goes today. The next time we will go through the history of the rebellion and the last sections of this paper 53 that was all about the Lucifer rebellion, and then we continue this journey with a new paper, paper 54, which is all about the problems of the Lucifer rebellion. In actuality, this is very important information that we get to know so that we get a deeper understanding of why the things are happening as they are happening here on earth right now. And on earth, we are still dealing with the consequences and the ripple effects of this Lucifer rebellion. We see this reflected back in all the world leaders and those politicians who are very connected to these world leaders. Um, all right, I go out of this one and go into the end. Um, I want to thank you for listening and reading along with me. Um, I advise you to re-listen and reread this information with the help of the Holy Spirit and the Spirit of Truth, and ask these spirits to give you an in-depth clarity and much more information and a deeper understanding of what you have heard and read today. I want to say God bless you and have a joyful, beautiful day filled with a lot of joy and love and wisdom.